Okay, and now we're recording. Welcome everyone to today's first Thursday. Um, Today we're going to be hearing from a native Detroiter, Elliot Broom. He has worked at the Detroit Institute of Arts for 12 years and is the Vice President Museum Operations. He holds a degree in art history from U of M Dearborn and extensive experience in hospitality business, working for hotel companies, including the Ritz-Carlton, Four Seasons, and others. Today, we welcome Elliot to the DALNET First Thursday, which is a monthly offering to our members and the public. The first Thursday of each month, we present webinars and professional enrichment workshops. Today, we're honored to have Mr. Broom share with us the experience that guests at the DIA will encounter, and he's going to offer a behind-the-scenes view of how our nationally renowned museum is responding to the demands of operating during a pandemic. And with that, I turn it over to you, Elliot.
Thank you, Michael, and good morning to everyone. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be able to share a little bit of what we did to prepare the museum to reopen in the midst of a pandemic and stay open, more importantly. So I have a presentation that I'd like to walk through. I'll do so fairly briskly. And leave time at the end of the presentation in case anyone has questions that I might be able to answer. So fingers crossed that the technology works. I am going to do my best to share the screen and hopefully make this work. Can everyone see the screen that's up that says a new and unique way to explore the DIA?
I am seeing it, Elliot. So I think so.
Okay. All right, so with that, I'll begin. And I put and so everyone is aware, you're seeing a presentation that I did for the board of directors when just after we reopened the museum, because they were very curious as to what it took to get the museum ready to reopen. And so you're seeing the very same thing that our board saw. And again, please do not hesitate to ask questions at the end. And that little asterisk you'll see I put there, I thought it was kind of being a bit cheeky by noting that it was during the pandemic that we are trying to reopen the museum and showing the image of our mascot sculpture, Donkey. We put a mask on Donkey. He's the one piece of art that can be touched in the museum, and he is beloved by children and adults alike. And let's see, there we go. All right, so let me make sure that's the right slide. All right, so it begins with we had a team. The team was led by our Chief Operating Officer Rob Bowen, and along with a few members from the museum representing some of the areas, and we worked together to determine the plan for reopening, which was exhaustive because there were so many parts that were tied to what we have to do as an institution in order to be able to reopen. We thought it was important that we work with a consultant that could help us, and luckily through the Detroit Science Center, we were introduced to NSF International, which is the National Sanitation Foundation. And as you can see on this slide, NSF is actually somewhat locally based, being that they were founded at the University of Michigan in 1944. They are a not-for-profit, actually, but they have grown since 1944, and they now have offices globally. So it was really interesting that we worked with people that were both local out of Ann Arbor, as well as their one of their head virologists, who was just outside of Toronto. So we worked with them as well as someone who lives more locally, who was on the ground and in the museum often during the consulting period. So the reason we went with NSF was after meeting with them virtually and then doing a bit of research, we realized that we had the good fortune of having NSF in our backyard because they are experts in the field of health, of public health, food safety, water management, and all forms of certification. And then at the same time, we worked with NSF. NSF also consulted Midtown Detroit, Inc., and did a project that was more comprehensive for the other institutions in the cultural district. But that we wanted to contract with them separately, and we took a deeper dive. So what they did for the district was more macro, and what they did for the DIA was at a more micro level. So these are the items that we addressed in how we operate. So all visitors and staff are required to wear masks while inside the building, of course. We have restricted admissions seriously to 100 per half hour. And visitors must reserve a timed ticket in advance. Gallery flow is now directed. However, the promenade, which is the main pathway or hallway connecting both the north and south wings of the museum on the first and second floor, that pathway is bidirectional, and then other pathways throughout the museum are also bidirectional. So while we were advised to direct our visitors as much as possible, we wanted to do so in a way that would not be perceived as restrictive. Of course, every gallery and public space has a capacity limit that was set by NSF. They measured every space, looked at square footage, and then used their calculations to tell us how many visitors we could have in any space at any given time. In order to get our folks back to work, back in the building, and to be able to reopen the building to the public, we redeployed staff. So staff may not be working in the position for which they were hired, but they're on the floor helping serve the public. So that was a win, what I consider a win-win, that we were able to get people back to work inside the museum and be able to open the museum to the public. And then finally, this is a new change. Originally, food service was closed altogether in the museum, and now, because of a partnership with Avalon International Breads, of course, most of you, if not all of you, are familiar with Avalon being based right here in Midtown. We are able to have a limited food service offer for our visitors, and we survey any visitor that comes, because everybody is giving their email address when they register for a ticket or reserve a ticket. We then send a survey, and they can either choose to respond or not. But what we found from a great many responses is that the one thing that our visitors really missed was the opportunity to be able to sit down, have a bite to eat, or a cup of coffee. So again, we return food service, but it's very limited, and I'll explain that a bit later. So these are the things that are new: staff and vendor arrival, visitor arrival, safety first, exploring the galleries, what's closed, and even how one exits the building. It's a bit different. We have the good fortune to we have our own IT department inside the museum, and they worked with a vendor to create an app that was designed exclusively for the DIA for our staff and vendors to use. So for reasons of contact tracing, we have this system called ClearPass, and all staff, before they are coming to the building, and register through ClearPass, and then their registration is then approved, so that we know who is in the building and the time period that they plan into the building. Because, hopefully this doesn't happen, but should we have an exposure inside of the building, this would be our way to be able to trace who should have been in the building at a specific time, and then be able to work backwards from there. It's really easy to use. As you can see, I'm showing screenshots of what the phone app looks like, and then there's a desktop-based app as well, so that any staff member can use their laptop or desktop computer and register through the portal as well. So this is what it looks like now when staff arrive. Of course, we employed social distancing markers as soon as we began reopening the museum to staff first. Staff were back in the building for about a month before we were able to reopen the building to the public, because we had to prepare the museum for this reopening, and we'd been closed for about 3 months at that point, and there was a lot of work that we had to do internally just to get the building ready once again to receive visitors. The tent that you see in the center photo, that is the arrival tent for all staff and vendors. We placed the tent outside of the museum proper, so that that's the point at which one is screened. We use infrared cameras to screen our staff, well, staff and visitors. But we thought this would be a way to catch someone if they were running a fever. They wouldn't even enter the building. We would stop them at a point outside of the building. And in case you're wondering, that tent is heated and cooled. So it ran nice and cool during the summer, and then we hope it will stay warm during the winter months. So the visitor arrival process is different as well. We only have one point of entry to the DIA, and that is through the entrance on Farnsworth Street, which is the image on the left. And just like for staff, visitors are scanned for temperature as well, and you can see in the photo on the right, that's what it looks like. It's in the outer vestibule before visitors enter the building. That's where the screening takes place. We change the way guests or visitors check in as well. So we moved to a completely touchless system. Previously, as you'll see on the picture on the right, visitors would step up to the admissions desk and take care of their membership admission there. Now we have another desk set up with 3 iPad stations, and visitors are either have a QR code that they can upload on their phone, or they can print it out. They walk up, scan the QR code, and that is their admission into the museum. The reason you see these framed pieces of plexiglass in the picture on the right is because we still have staff at that desk in case we have a visitor that has a problem scanning their QR code, if it's a member who has a specific question and needs personalized help, or if a visitor shows up and doesn't have a reserve ticket. We keep a certain number of tickets per half-hour time slot out of that 100 off to the side for folks that come and don't know in advance for walk-ups. Now, this begins safety first. In the 2 images on your left, you'll see plexiglass desktop shields. We put plexiglass all over this museum. At any place or any position where staff would potentially have a prolonged encounter with a visitor, we put plexiglass shields up to better protect both the visitor and the staff members. On the 2 photos on the right, just 2 examples of hand sanitizer stations. We have deployed hand sanitizer throughout the museum. You are never very far from a hand sanitizer station. The images you see, there's one. What's obscured by the social distancing sign leading up to Great Hall is the handrail. So we thought that it was important to be thoughtful in placement of hand sanitizer. So we at the tops and bottoms of handrails, we have hand sanitizer stations because people need to hold on to handrails for stability. By elevator buttons, there's hand sanitizer. When you're exiting a gallery where there's a door handle, there's hand sanitizer. We have to date, I think we're up to about 70 hand sanitizer deployments throughout this building. So as I said, you're never very far from the opportunity to use a bit of hand sanitizer while you're inside the museum. We also had to do abundant signage. So we wanted to try and stay somewhat thematic with our signage, so that those are examples that you'll see on the left, where we use some of our permanent collection items, such as Kermit the Frog, who is representing just about not touching your face and not touching others. The postman is, of course, wearing the mask, and the wedding dance is a fun way to represent what is not an example of social distancing, but it's our call asking visitors to socially distance. On the right, you'll just see other examples of signs that we put outside of the museum on our campus, just letting returning visitors know that we have new procedures in place, as well as you can see the one image on the farthest to your right that just kind of collapses all of our standards into one board that lists everything. I will say that the #1 challenge we've had since reopening, it's face masks. Our staff has given us a great deal of feedback that they have to constantly remind our visitors to properly wear face masks. It's not that visitors aren't wearing their face masks, but what we have found is that they're wearing them just below their nose. Sometimes they'll take them off to take a photo with a work of art that they really connect with, and we have to constantly remind them that we ask that they be worn properly over both the nose and the mouth. So much so that we originally deployed, I would guesstimate maybe 25 face mask signs independently throughout the museum. We then added an additional 40. So that is the sign that is most prevalent, as you'll see in this next image. So this is what some of what we call lollipop signs look like. And the one on the left is the face mask sign, and the one in the center is the social distance sign. And what we thought would be most important was that we remind our visitors of social distancing while in galleries. And so that is the sign that we put in every single gallery of the museum. And then we found out that it was really the face mask sign that we needed most. So we had all of those social distancing signs reprinted so that they were two-sided, and on the reverse was the face mask. So that is how we added the 40 additional face mask signs throughout the building. And then the sign, or the image on the right, is just an example of even social distancing, reminding visitors of capacity in elevators. These are just examples of how we distance on the floor. And in the bathroom, we thought it would be kind of fun to use a pattern that might communicate in a more playful way, where one can stand, or what part of the facility they can use and or not use in order to maintain a safe social distance. We created zones. So this was one of the most difficult and most important parts of our plan. And we created zones out of galleries. In some cases, a single gallery, such as Egyptian art, the image in the center, would be one zone. But in other spaces, such as our African galleries, Islamic galleries, and Asian galleries, that is one section of the first floor. And we combined all three of those areas to create one large zone with what I would say is essentially one-way movement through that entire zone. So if you wanted to see the Asian galleries, one must enter African, and then walk through the African galleries, then through the Islamic galleries, and then finally into the Asian galleries before exiting. So this is where one way in, one way out comes into play. When you enter a zone, you cannot exit where you entered, or we ask you not to exit where you enter, that there's a designated exit for you. We've had interesting feedback as it relates to these one-way paths and zones. Some visitors find it confusing, and they question, why do we have to do this when the museum isn't that busy? But what I found most interesting are the number of visitors that have responded in our surveys that have thanked us for doing it, because they said that they have actually seen more of the museum than they normally would, because they have to move into these gallery spaces that they may not normally go to. So that was what I thought was a really interesting bit of feedback, and a major positive. So we have these directional arrows, again, deployed everywhere. We did it in a way that we hoped would not be kind of what I call site pollution, where it would detract from the visitor experience and their ability to observe and engage with the works of art, but there are enough of them to remind our visitors that we're asking them to continue in one direction. So these are just varying examples throughout the museum of how we've deployed these directional arrows. We couldn't reopen all areas of the museum just because of the capacity, as well as some areas like the auditorium and lecture hall. At the time that we reopened the museum, by law in the state, we couldn't reopen theaters. Even though that has since changed, we have made the decision that we at the DIA are not prepared to reopen the auditorium or the lecture hall, because we want to maintain a safe environment for all, and we just don't feel that we are ready to manage the upkeep that it will take to do it properly. If we were a freestanding, if the auditorium or the lecture hall were freestanding buildings and they didn't have fabric covered chairs, it would be a lot easier. We could use electrostatic sprayers to clean the spaces. But because these are either inside or contiguous to the main building, we don't have that luxury, at least not very easily. And other areas such as Kresge Court, that one has not reopened. Again, it's mainly because of the furnishings that are in that space. Almost everything is a soft covered furnishing, which means sanitization is extremely difficult. The Cafe DIA, this is actually a great image because it was closed at the time. We've since reopened it, but you can see this is the way the cafe looks under normal operating circumstances. And if you were to see an image of it today, you would see that this space that can normally accommodate 180 diners is now set at a max capacity of 30. So a major downward shift in capacity. And then finally, exiting the building. So if you remember, I said that visitors enter at the Farnsworth entrance, but they cannot exit at the Farnsworth entrance, but they are free to exit at the 3 other points of exit in the building. Normally, you could enter or exit at just about all 3 of these. Well, Kirby is the business entrance, so that was only for visitors coming to do business here at the museum. But the loggia at John R., that is traditionally the busiest point of entry and exit for us. That is now exit only. That exit here sign was new and added as part of the reopening plan, although now we all love it because it looks like it should have been there forever. And then, of course, Woodward Avenue. And that concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Gustafson. I used to work at the DIA, but I'm wondering about, did you get feedback from the security guards? I remember there was generally a guard in every room, and I came a few minutes late. I apologize if you addressed it in the beginning of your talk, but how did you incorporate the feedback from the security guards or the people who were monitoring each gallery and room?
So as it relates to the reopening plan, we did not consult with staff on that because I don't know if you were here when I mentioned that we consulted with NSF International. This is a consultancy that has a great deal of expertise in safety management. So we turned to them to help us understand exactly how we could reopen an institution the size of the DIA, being, we're over 600,000 square feet in total. Of that, about 400,000 square feet of space is dedicated to the public. So we needed them to help us understand, how do we get our arms around this monster? Once we reopened, we then started soliciting feedback from our staff. All of the folks on the floor who have been redeployed, we still conduct shift briefings at the beginning of the day, and then for the first month, we did end of day shift briefings, and that was the opportunity for us to get feedback from our team on the floor to tell us what they thought was working, what wasn't working, where we needed to consider making changes, that kind of thing. And to this day, we are still working through and tweaking and making changes.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Any other questions?
What do you see as your biggest challenge? Looking forward, yeah.
Looking forward, it's just making sure that the museum is as safe as possible. We want, of course, like every other institution, we want to be able to stay open, but we have to be able to do so and do so safely. Something I didn't address in the presentation was that our cleaning standards had to change. It was essentially, I won't call it a 180, but it was a major shift in that certain areas of the museum, such as the restrooms, any high or low touch items such as elevator buttons, handrails, door handles, all of those items must be cleaned and sanitized once an hour. So it really changed the way that our incredible environmental services team has to operate, because we had to break them into zones and break them. We had to break them out in ways that were different from how they normally been deployed in the museum, because it's really important that every hour they are walking downstairs and just taking rags that are covered with the sanitizing chemical and going over to make sure all of these touch surfaces are maintained the way they need to be. Same thing, once an hour, every restroom is closed for about 15 minutes, because that's what it takes, 10 to 15 minutes to clean and then sanitize a restroom. So it's a bit of an inconvenience for our visitors, because as large as this building is, we do not have robust bathrooms. So if you're at one bathroom and it's closed, your next closest bathroom is a bit of a hike. But again, it's something that we have to do. And speaking of that, it's interesting that the feedback that we got from our environmental services team was that people didn't necessarily always pay attention to the fact that they were trying to clean and sanitize the restroom, and they would walk in. So we bought these bands, these kind of straps that go over the doors that just explain very clearly that this bathroom is closed due to cleaning. And the feedback I've gotten since we employed them, is that, thanks so much. This is working. People are now not entering while we're trying to do our jobs. Any other questions?
Yeah, Elliot, I was curious, when developing this plan with the NSF, that was probably taking place during the summer or the warmer months. Is there talks now as we transition to winter months, and will things change, or?
That's a really good question. You're absolutely right. So NSF worked on this plan. Let's see. I started coming back working on a pretty regular basis in the museum in mid-May. and that's about when NSF came on board, and we opened the museum on July 10th, to be exact. So we worked with NSF the entire time, and it was all summer. It really doesn't change at all for winter months, but we have had to make adjustments because of cold weather versus warm weather. Some of those adjustments are we normally have 2 coat checks throughout the museum. Well, we cannot put our staff in the position where they have to handle visitors their personal belongings such as coats or scarves or anything like that. So we've not reopened our coat check, but what we did do is we've placed coat racks in Prentice Court so that visitors can self-store their coats, hats, scarves, and umbrellas during the colder weather months. Additionally, we have queues to get into this building every weekend, just about every Saturday and Sunday. The time slots fill up, and we have visitors kind of socially distancing on dots. We put dots outside and kind of up part of the sidewalk, but we realize that they will freeze if they have to stand outside waiting to get in. So just this week, our enclosure went in. We've at the Farnsworth entrance. Normally, it's kind of an open air semi colonnade. We've enclosed that on one side so that there's only one large opening at the end, and then we put overhead infrared heaters in. So hopefully, by cutting down on the wind draft and by putting this ambient heating in, we'll at least keep the visitors somewhat comfortable while they're waiting to get in, because we can only have one set of visitors, whether it's an individual or a family or group, in the vestibule where they are being screened for temperature at a time. Those are the 2 major changes we've had to make for the cold weather.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
And does anyone else have questions?
Okay.
I have a question, sorry.
Oh, sure.
It's Jennifer again, your operations, but in this meantime, have you devoted a lot more energy of the institution to maybe digital video type tours and with the education department and institutions nearby?
Yeah, so another great question that you said it accurately. I am operations, but I can tell you what I know because I see a lot of what's happening in the museum. So yes, because we were closed for so long, we still had to be an institution that visitors could connect with, right? Like so many other institutions all over the world. So we ramped up video production as quickly as possible. In fact, that's what happened on the stage in the DFT auditorium, is that the stage with a green screen for doing all kinds of backgrounds was put in place, and that is where all the filming takes place to produce all of the video content. And our team were nothing short of brilliant, like the curators and some of the other staff members from our collections management side and the conservation side. They were filming videos at home, and then we would upload them to YouTube. So yes, that has been a major ramp up for us during the pandemic. Additionally, normally during the year, we host thousands of school kids. During peak periods, we're at about 1,000 school kids a day coming through the museum. And obviously that isn't happening, and it won't happen for the foreseeable future. So, and the same thing for seniors. Every Thursday we host senior groups at the museum. So what we've done, our education team and curatorial team have worked together, and now they have created what we call kits that are going to be sent out to teachers and to senior centers so that they can have a DIA experience with objects that are made for learning and for teaching that we can send to the community. And so we've had to work with NSF again. We've since the initial consultancy, we've engaged NSF 2 more times to help us work through other things, such as these kits. We needed to know how to handle the kits and sanitize them properly and safely when they return to the building. So they helped us work through what that process will look like, which took buying equipment and understanding the length of time that the items would need to rest. If items such as maybe a book would need how we needed to open it to let it breathe and rest, and for how long. And then other items are, when they come back, they're immediately sanitized and wiped down, and then everything still, even if it's wiped down with a chemical, everything rests before it goes out again. And there was another point, Jennifer, that I wanted to make, and it just escaped me. It was, I think maybe that was it, kits and videos. Oh, I know. And the last thing was we are about to open a special exhibition. It'll be, it's called Detroit Style, automobile design in Detroit from 1960 to 2020, or 1959 to 2019. Don't hold me to it, but it's essentially 60 years of automobile design in Detroit. And that comes with its own set of challenges, because we're reopening a set of galleries that had been closed. We needed to know capacities in each of the galleries. And then we had to figure out how we're going to manage and control access to each of those galleries. So, and again, we turned to NSF to help us to figure that out, because it's amazing how complicated what we took for granted, how complicated it is to manage these things that we took for granted in the past. It was kind of like, oh yeah, sure, we know how to manage a special exhibition. Sure, we're going to bring 200,000 people through this special exhibition over the period of its run, no problem. Now it's very different.
Well, it sounds very impressive, all the things you're doing. So kudos to everyone working together. Thank you.
And that's an appropriate word. It really took an army, really an army of staff, of the colleagues here at the DIA to be able to make this happen, and to continue to allow the museum to be open every day. It's not easy. It's never perfect, but everybody is doing the very best that they can, and because of that, we're able to keep the doors open thus far.
Well, we appreciate that, Elliot, and we appreciate the work you and your colleagues are doing. I think it's probably about time we wrap up, unless there are any more questions. I will remind everyone too that this is recorded and will be on DALNET's YouTube channel in case you'd like to come back to it and revisit. But if there's nothing else, then I thank you again, Elliot, and thank everyone for joining us.
Thank you. Oh, it looks like question popped up. Yeah. Yes, the museum shop is opened. It reopened when the museum reopened on July 10th. But like every other space, there is a capacity limit, and the museum shop is managed very tightly, because even though it's a fairly large museum shop, there are so many displays and cabinets that the capacity, the human capacity to be in the shop was actually quite low. So we have to manage that. So there is, unless it's extremely slow in the museum, there's always someone managing the entrance and exit of the museum shop, kind of keeping count to make sure that we stay within the capacity that was given. Okay, I guess that's it, Michael.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for allowing me to spend some time with everyone on the call. I hope it was, at the very least, informational, and that you could take something away from it. And we hope to see you here at the DIA soon.
Yes. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Take care.
You too.
Thank you.